Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Touchpoint Group Banking Insights session. And this particular one is around the US Nationals. And for the month of October, we're going to dig into why some banks' performance is lumpy with their reviews and others are just so highly consistently rated. And then we're going to have a little look at how no matter how many features you can add in your app, getting four fundamental attributes absolutely right can have a dramatic effect on positive impact across the board with both your customers' experience and corresponding rankings. Tony Patrick, welcome as usual. Looking forward to you taking us through this one.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. So I'll get stuck straight into it. So today we're looking at the US Nationals, so Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase. And I'll get straight into it. One of the first things to look at to give us a guide of what's going on is the score. So what's actually gone on in October. Now, one of the things that was, well, I suppose the two consistent ones, looking at the top there, we've got Citi and Bank of America consistently moving along at nice scores, above 4.25 most of the time, and above 4.5 for Citibank. So very positive. Obviously, there is obviously room for Bank of America to close that gap, but it is that they are both doing very well. One of the things we're seeing here is this Wells Fargo increase from the major app update in March. It's still moving in the right direction, so positive, but it has taken a while. So 7-8 months, it still sort of hasn't reached that level we had back in December. Now, of course, this score here is the engaged customer score. So what these are people who've given a score in the app stores, and they've also given a rating and a comment that allows us to understand why these scores are moving, and it also makes it very sensitive. So in some other measures, you might not see what we're seeing here in terms of the dissatisfaction with Wells Fargo. But one of the things I want to have a look at here is we looked at this last time as to why Chase is fluctuating. But one of the things I want to look at is, and consistency is one of the things, well, it's consistently inconsistent is what I'd say here, because it's ducks down for 2 months, jumps back up for one, and similar here. Now it's ducked down for two more months. I'd expect in November it's going to jump back up again. But again, for customers, that's a very frustrating experience because you want your app to be consistent, not sort of jumping around the place. So let's have a quick look at what's happening inside here. And one of the things we can look at is the app versions that are coming through. Now I'm looking at Citi here. This is Citi. This is when app versions are released and as they drop away in usage. So at any one point, there's obviously a couple of versions being used by our users, by customers. But if I look at it here, if I just put my mouse over this one here, which is our, say, version 9.49, it's sitting there, it peaks up in April. Then we go forward to 9.50, and we see a peak up there in May. And I can continue this. We sort of, 9.51, we see a peak up there in June. The only thing that's slightly inconsistent is that 9.52 had a bit of it looks like there were two releases there, 9.52 and 9.521. And that was the peak then. But otherwise, we're getting a very consistent movement in the right direction, including a release near the end of October, which is 9.56. But it's a very consistent sort of movement up and down. Let's compare that with what we see for Chase. Now, you can see a vague idea of things jumping up and down, but the case here, it looks like spaghetti. You've got various versions going on at various points in time. Now, one thing here, for example, I can see there's a version here, 4.302, which was released in May, and it peaked up in May in terms of frequency. But it seems that the feedback coming through from customers was flowing through into August and September, which means customers either don't feel compelled to make an update on the app, or they're just, they're not forced to for some reason. So in this case here, the feedback coming through from August, 13% of it was actually coming through from an app release in May. And the real release that was happening there was 4.331. And there's other ones as well. There's multiple versions still sort of flowing through. So this inconsistency, so whether it's customers feel like, I don't want to update because the one I've got now is okay. My last experience with an update wasn't good, so I want to wait until I'm happy. but that causes ongoing problems for Chase customers. So as they keep those old bugs, and the problem for Chase is as they go and fix those problems, they think, well, the problems are still there. I need to refix them, where in fact it's just the old versions causing that problem. So let's have a brief look at just some global numbers. So we saw before the scores we saw for Citibank and others. What I can see here is just a UK-US perspective. So what we can see here is that Citibank actually ranks third from this perspective at 4.6, and this is across Q3 up till the end of September. And we got there Bank of America at 4.3. But we can see there's a clear difference. As we saw in that first chart, we can see there's a clear difference to Chase and to Wells Fargo with the differences there. So what we can do with that is actually understand what's the sentiment coming through from each of these four customer groups. And that will give us a feel about what's going on in this world. So let's jump across to that. So inside Epiphany here, I can actually have an understanding of what's going on. So what I'm looking at first is, this is Chase. And what we're looking at here on the right is where does Chase over-index compared to the other three banks for October? Just looking at October. One of the things I can see right in the middle there, they're over-indexing on threatening churn. And the frequency is represented by the size of the text here. Now again, this isn't just a word cloud as such, these are actually concepts. So the idea of threatening churn is not just people saying I'm threatening churn because I don't say it that way, but it's things like I'm thinking of leaving, I want to close my account, I'm sick of this, I want to move somewhere else, for example. So all the variations of that. And we can quickly see here there's things like poor mobile app update is coming through as well. So there's issues for customers about how these updates are being pushed through and I suppose being enforced in terms of letting customers hang on to those updates for months on end. So that's interesting. So let's have a look up the chain a bit at Wells Fargo. So what we see here coming through is a slightly different story, a bit of green coming through. So it's a bit positive. But one of the clear things I can see here about Wells Fargo is that there's a bit of green for good app check deposit. So some people are having a really great experience with a check deposit, whereas others are having this red here just shows me there's also some negative stuff going on. So for Wells Fargo, for them, I know they can do well with their check deposit because they are for a lot of customers, but just need to fix the others and understand where that's happening. So which customer group is that hitting hardest? Let's improve that piece because check deposit is one of the key things for customers here. But there are some other areas where it's underperforming to others, like payment features, making P2P payments, etc. So there's room to improve that definitely. Let's step up a bit further into Bank of America. Now, one of the normal processes we see with this approach is we see right at the bottom, often we get things like difficult to log in, there's a bad update process, etc. But once you overcome that, your journeys can start to shine. Your journeys are coming through really well. Although with Bank of America, there's a few things that are sort of a slight issue for customers. Navigation is an issue, but all that there's some positive things though. It's a very useful app, I'm satisfied, and so on. There's some small credit card issues going on in here as well. Now I can obviously click on these and go into a lot of detail, but for the time here, we can't get into the exact detail. So let's look at, for this particular group, best practice for this group. So Citibank is doing really well. Let's have a look at where it over-indexes. So first of all, good app usability, operability, easy to use, but also so these journeys are coming through, easy payment process, easy to navigate, good app user interface, etc. So very positive. One negative for them is in-app advertising. We see it a few places here, advertising and so on. Let's have a quick click on it. And what we see here is too many ads is one of the biggest things. So that's interesting. The last piece I want to show you is a very brief look at how do each of these apps, these banks score across our journeys. If you look on the right, we can see big spikes for blue, which is our Citibank. They are doing very well on the extreme basics, monitoring account activity, viewing my account balance, paying bills, and transferring between accounts. So that's where they're doing very well. And I think that that's what others need to focus on, getting those basics right before you start to expand out and include other things in your mix of attributes. Thank you, Glenn.
Great to get those insights, my friend. And it is so critical to focus on getting those foundational things right before you start working on the little micro changes that you can make across the board. So Well done, my friend, and we look forward to talking to you all next month.